globaltalkradio.com.
Well, and I think gallstones here in this case, and this is why I bring it up now, is because for those of you who watched the series Hell's Kitchen, one of the contestants on Hell's Kitchen, right there on air, was having a gallstone attack, and he then showed on air these gallstones, and people think gallstone, you're talking maybe the size of a marble or something, where these are actually like the size of a pencil tip. They're not very big.
Yes and no. Actually, I had 40 gallstone attacks, so I know how that feels, and mine usually lasted between 3 and 7 or 10 days, and they're extremely painful, and mine weren't just pinhead size. Mine were actually, half an inch, up to half an inch.
Wow.
My wife passed a 2.5-inch size calcified gallstone from the gallbladder, and so they're not unusual. I can tell you that. People bring their stones to me, and we are quite amazed about the size that's possible for these stones to actually come out. And if they get stuck during a gallbladder attack, it's very serious. But when you do a liver flush, then you prevent that from happening, because while you flush the liver, you pass out an enormous amount of bile, which is extremely oily, and it's impossible for stones to get stuck in any of the bile ducts. The most amazing thing is that they just turn up in the toilet bowl, and you can see most of them floating in the toilets. These are the intrahepatic stones. They're called also cholesterol stones. Their color is green. They look like peas, and they are often just pea size. They can be smaller. They can also be bigger. They can be chickpea size or almond size. So they're varied. They can come also in different colors. Some are red stones. They are the bilirubin stones. Some are black stones, which are extremely old. That means you can trace them back to like 20, 30, 40 years. It's really amazing when people report back to me, what kinds of stones and how many they are passing. And we're talking about not just a handful of stones, we're talking about thousands of stones a person can hold in the bile ducts of the liver, and also some in the gallbladder.
And that's the whole point of why this really fits into New Age Radio, is that process of the cleansing, or what we call detoxification.
Mm-hmm.
Now, let's kind of back up just a little bit here. Gallstones, like you're saying, are basically produced by the liver. Does it affect any specific age category of person, or is it even heavily male or heavily female, or does it even matter?
Well, female, people, they are more likely to develop, gallstones in the gallbladder. But most people just have equal opportunity to produce them. It depends on what they eat, what their lifestyle is, what they drink, how upset they are, how they respond to stressful situations, because that changes the flora of the bile. And any of these can, and drugs, medical drugs, are the leading cause of bile stones, or biliary stones, or intrahepatic stones, as they call them, or cholesterol stones. There's just different names for the same thing. We can just call them gallstones, because they are made of gall. Gall is the same name as bile. So they're made of bile, foremost of all. Most of them are made of bile, and they appear in the bile ducts of the liver, which is a huge network of ducts and channels, and they have small ones, they have large ones. There are thousands of bile ducts where stones can be harbored, and they sit there and block the bile. And once the bile flow is intercepted, then the food cannot be digested. You produce a lot of toxins from undigested food sitting in the intestine. You absorb a lot of these toxins into the lymphatic system and bloodstream, and that's carried to the liver, and the liver tries to detoxify the blood and dumps that into the bile. But if the bile flow is blocked, then the liver doesn't have the opportunity to get rid of these toxins that are produced every day in the body. Even simple metabolic waste products like urea, ammonia, uric acid, and so many other breakdown products of dead cells they get caught up. If you have drugs and if you take medical drugs, then that makes it even worse because they produce a lot of stones in the bile ducts of the liver. So you have backflushing of toxins into the body, which then creates more stones in the liver because the liver is not able to handle it. And they get caught in the bile. The bile becomes coagulated, it thickens up, it becomes so thick that it starts, clotting. It starts becoming. You develop clumps of bile, which are the gallstones. In the gallbladder, you can grow calcified stones where minerals get caught up and held back by the gallbladder, and that starts causing calcification of these stones, which then become rock hard. And these are the ones that modern medicine is referring to when you talk about gallstones. So they typically forget the finding that, of course, you can trace in medical archives and look up pictures where you see intrahepatic stones, these green ones that bulge out of dissected livers. But typically the normal doctor doesn't refer to them. They are not even aware of them. You would have to be specialized in the liver, but unfortunately it's just not talked about. Anyone comes to the doctor's office and complains about having pain in the liver area, they say, well, okay, you have a gallbladder problem, let's do an ultrasound, an x-ray, and see what is there. If they find 1 or 2 or 3 stones, they say, oh, let's better take it out, it's useless anyway. It doesn't create much of a disadvantage, and I have, in my book, The Amazing Liver and Gallbladder Flush, really showed and given evidence that in fact, it causes such serious problems as cancer and arthritis and heart disease.
Well, not only that, but on your website, you've got a whole list of things to look at to basically say, if you suffer from any of these symptoms, to check for gallstones.
Absolutely.
And everybody knows that the liver is important in the body, but I don't think people realize how important, because the liver can actually, a problem with the liver can affect your eyesight.
Eyesight, everything, every single cell in the body depends totally and absolutely on healthy liver function. And as I said in my book, a person can have apparently normal liver functions, and the doctor said, well, your liver is great, there are no elevated enzymes in your bloodstream, go home and everything is fine. But the liver may just function at 60% of its capacity. And it will go down to 50% and 40%. Once it's at 36%, you're still okay. And yet once it's at 35%, you have liver failure and you die. So the liver doesn't complain very easily. It doesn't tell you when there's something wrong, like other organs would tell you when you get some sort of pain. But most people don't get liver pain unless they have a gallstone attack or an inflammation in the gallbladder.
And some of the things that you list here as being some symptoms are pretty amazing. Things like high cholesterol, heart disease, brain disorders, dizziness or fainting. One that they've come out with a lot of herbal drugs and everything. Impotence can be caused by gallstones. Stiff neck, asthma, knee problems, obesity, fatigue, kidney disease. I mean, the list is huge.
It's on and on. And you can trace it. You can trace everything back to the liver. In fact, I've never ever seen a patient in all those years, that I've had people from all over the world come to me with all kinds of problems. And when I put them on the liver cleanse, they always pass hundreds or thousands of stones. And once you see these symptoms disappear, then you wonder, well, it obviously must have had something to do with the liver. Because when you see those stones floating in the toilet, you are amazed that you can hold things like that, and yet the body is still alive. That's the most surprising thing.
Now, one of the things you had mentioned is the liver and the production of bile.
Yes.
And we know what bile is mostly associated with this black mucus that the body excretes upon death, but what really is bile?
Well, bile is one of the most important digestive fluids. and the liver produces up to 1.5 quarts of bile per day. That's an enormous amount of fluid, green, bitter, sour, tasting fluid, which is alkaline in nature. And so the liver cells, all that they try to do is to make as much bile as they can squeeze out and put into the bile ducts. And the bile ducts collect it and pass it into the common bile duct. The common bile duct leads up into the small intestine. And before it does that, it combines with the pancreatic duct. And the pancreatic duct, the pancreatic enzymes which pass through the pancreatic duct, they depend on the presence of bile in order to be able to digest the food that you eat. Now, without the proper bile secretions, you are unable to digest your food well. You produce a lot of undigested food which ferments and putrefies in your intestines, and it clogs up your small and large intestine. And this causes major difficulties because once you haven't digested food, it becomes sticky. It sticks and attaches itself to the intestinal wall. And that causes eventually back flushing of waste. Typically, a person who is constipated would have total back flushing of waste. That means a lot of the intestinal waste that the body is trying to get rid of, that includes bacteria, dead and alive, and parasites and worms. If a person is a meat eater, every meat eater has worms in the intestines. So, and then a lot of acids, gases, antibodies from foods that were ingested. So a lot of your waste products that are not finding their way out of the body, they are being regurgitated. They are actually moving upwards. And I had one person even brought up fecal matter, literally, through the mouth. People with bad breath, that's basically just fecal matter that is coming up into the stomach. And from the stomach it moves up into the esophagus in minute particles. It can move up into the chest. It can cause chest problems. It can cause thyroid congestion.
Not to mention ulcers even.
And of course acid reflux. Most people think that acid reflux is just happening out of the blue, sometimes because they eat certain things. But in most cases, in 99% of the cases, it's back flushing of waste from the lower intestines that are clogged up. And the body is bringing it up like a river that moves down somewhere, down the mountain. But if you create a dam, a wall, that it cannot flow anymore, you create a lake. And so you put a lot of pressure onto the surrounding tissues, and eventually the body doesn't have any other outlet than bringing it up and bringing that stuff into the chest, throat area, causes tooth decay. It can move into the auditory ducts. It can cause ear pain, ear aches, ear infection, vertigo. Problems with the balance. It can move up into the nose and sinuses. How many people have nose and sinus infections? It's unbelievable.
I go through them heavily.
So filling up with mucus that is secreted in the stomach in order to trap toxins that come from underneath. And so all of that accumulates in the nose and sinuses, and then we wonder why we attract bacteria that try to break down that waste. And that's what bacteria do. Sinusitis is not caused by bacteria. It's a myth. What people call infections is not caused by bacteria. Even Louis Pasteur, who invented this idea, who created the theory that infections are caused by bacteria, he had to admit at his deathbed that this is not true. Bacteria, like inside the body or outside the body, they only get attached or they only get hooked to places where there is already decay, where there is some weak structures, where cells are already half dead, where they need to be disposed of. If the body cannot get rid of dead, congested cells, then we need bacteria to help doing that, and that's what bacteria are there for. And so we blame the bacteria for causing an infection, whereas in fact it's an accumulation of toxins and waste products that the body was unable to remove out of its own accord.
So in other words, if you've got some kind of a bacterial infection, then medicines can treat the bacteria, but yet you have another underlying problem that needs to be looked at.
Of course, yes. Just like I answered a lady on the internet, And she said, well, I had an infection and they gave me antibiotics, but since then I'm terribly bloated. And I said, well, they destroyed your friendly, beneficial bacteria that help to digest your food and to keep your immune system intact. And so we have more bacteria in our body, in fact, than we have cells in our body. We have hundreds of trillions of bacteria, and we have thousands of different species of bacteria in our body. So we shouldn't think that bacteria are harmful. We need the destructive bacteria. We need constructive bacteria. We have bacteria for everything. And if you destroy some of the bacteria with antibiotics, you set yourself up for a surplus of destructive bacteria and a diminishment of the friendly bacteria that help to make your B vitamins, B12, for example, in your liver and your large intestine. And so when you are causing that kind of problem to yourself, rather than fixing the causes of the problems, you are creating worse and worse symptoms, and the time will bring even more disasters in your way, because treating a symptom is one of the fallacies that we have fallen into. It's a trap, because as soon as you treat symptoms, you're actually creating worse problems. And why are we having 900,000 people dying each year from the side effects of the treatments? So these are many more people dying than from any other cause taken together, from all other causes, like traffic accidents and murders, homicides, or anything else taken together. So why are we, through the treatments, killing so many people in this country, and not even think twice about finding out what causes those different symptoms, rather than just treating them away as if the symptom is the disease, but the disease is something else. It's not the symptom. The symptom is a mirror effect of something far deeper that we need to address, and that is not disease treatment.
And we've been talking about the liver disease of it, but this buildup of toxins in the body can, as far as all the information from your website, can cause fibromyalgia, chronic fatigue syndrome, and a myriad of other problems. So how do we then deal with this?
Well, there's, again, one of the things that I stress in the book, clean your liver. There's, the Amazing Liver and Gallbladder Flush, which is the only authorized version. There's another one out, it's called the Amazing Liver and Gallbladder Cleanse, which I've written for the English market, but someone hijacked it, pirated it, and selling it and publishing and distributing it worldwide. So the only really authentic version is the Amazing Liver and Gallbladder Flush. And in that book I show exactly how a person can cleanse the bile ducts of the liver and the gallbladder safely at the comfort of one's home for a couple of dollars. All it takes is a little bit of olive oil, lemon juice, or apple juice and Epsom salts, and so with these couple of ingredients you can dispel an enormous number of stones. People are passing from anything from 50 to 1,000, and some people even 1,500 stones at a time. And it's quite remarkable what the liver does for us once these stones are gone. And the bile flow is increasing. That means the digestive system is improving. You digest your food better. You're eliminating waste better. You don't have to accumulate in the body. You don't have to trap toxins and waste in the connective tissues and hold on to that, which would lead to weight gain. So most of the weight gain that we experience in this country, the obesity factor, is responsible for is caused by people holding on to so much waste that needs to be neutralized by fatty tissue. And so when people are going on rigorous diets, they release a flood of toxins into the liver, which can overtax the blood eventually and can cause heart attacks. And I've had people come to me that said, well, I want to lose weight, and I said, well, I would say, well, first clean your organs of elimination before you attempt to do that. But then some people didn't listen, and I warned them that this can cause a heart attack. And in fact, some people had massive heart attacks and died because they went on rigorous weight loss programs without opening up the eliminative organs first, the liver, the kidneys, and the colon. So instead of unleashing a massive amount of toxins and passing that into the bloodstream and into the lymph system, it is better to first prepare the body for the weight loss. And weight loss takes place fairly automatic when you are cleansing the organs of elimination, improve your digestion, and make a couple of changes regarding your diet and lifestyle. And in one of my large books, it's called The Timeless Secrets of Health and Rejuvenation. It just lists everything that a person really needs to do in order to sustain a very healthy functioning in the body. So it's not just that the liver needs to be cleansed, but also the colon, and I stress that in the book, and I show different ways how to do that in both books, actually. And so this helps people to get a grip of what is really responsible for most ailments that a person could possibly suffer from.
And I know from being in the New Age circle here, I'm going to call it, for lack of a better term, for over 20 years myself, and talking to people and researching different things. One of the big things out there as far as treatments that a lot of these places will put out, and I think is kind of a myth, is cayenne pepper cleansing.
Yes.
And where you basically fast for like 7 to 10 days with no food and just drink massive quantities of liquid infused with cayenne pepper.
Mm.
And for one, that can't be healthy because now you're depriving your body of nutrients.
Yes, unfortunately, many of the extreme techniques that are out there, or methods that are out there, they forget that for example, a gallbladder needs to be stimulated in order to constantly fill up with bile again. And if a person does that kind of thing and there's not enough bile flow because there's nothing to eat that requires bile secretion, then the gallbladder is holding back on bile and it dries out inside. And so you get all that bile sitting there and breaking down into its components, and mineral salts are held back, and so suddenly you end up having solid gallstones, calcified gallstones. And a lot of people don't realize that that the same thing happens when they go on extreme fasts, like low-fat diets. That's one of the worst things that you can do to your body. Low-fat diets. It's literally blocking the body's ability to produce bile, and sets you up for severe digestive problems.
Well, then you also, on the other end of it, you have this Atkins diet where it's high protein and lower carbohydrates, which works for a short time, but that's not even a diet that you can stay on for long because your body then adapts to it, and now you have more problems.
Absolutely. I mean, one of the reasons why Atkins is now going bankrupt, I mean, he died. I actually once watched him on Larry King, and I said to my wife, he's going to die within a year, and in 1 year he was dead. It wasn't really an accident. He was obese. He had a heart attack 2 years before. Cardiovascular disease was one of the things that he was suffering from. Just one of the things. And you mentioned protein, high protein diets. Yes, you can, basically starve the body by eating a high protein diet. That works for a while, but eventually the body is catching up and say, hey, I need to survive. I'm not getting the fuel. I need glucose. I need things that come from what the plants produce. And plants, they are mostly carbon and hydrogen molecules, carbohydrates that they make from the air and the sun, and a little bit from a couple of minerals from the soil, and the water from the moisture that they take in from either from the soil or from the environment. And so the body, requires what foods that grow, the foods that are growing naturally, that have grown on this planet, for nearly ever. And if we deprive ourselves of those natural foods, then the body will naturally crave something or another, or it will simply malfunction. With regard to protein, it's a very simple thing. In one of my books, Timeless Secrets of Health and Rejuvenation, I have a chapter on heart disease, coronary heart disease, and I'll show to the reader that basically it's not a disease, it's a survival mechanism, and it's actually quite a simple one. But in our way of looking and treating diseases, we don't appreciate the fact that the body never makes a mistake. We believe that the body is making a mistake when it creates a disease, but that's not true. The body is always on our side. It never commits suicide, even when we call them autoimmune diseases. Autoimmune diseases, where the body is attacking its own cells, it's not attacking its own cells. It's attacking the toxins that have been accumulated in the cell membranes. When you look at the cell membranes of an arthritic person, you'll find the cell membranes are so thick they are caught up. They have fatty acids, like trans fatty acids from refined processed foods. They put all those trans fatty acids and oils in there that are impossible for the human body to absorb or make use of, and so they get caught up in the cell membranes. They clog up the body. And the same thing happens with the concentrated protein foods. Nobody is talking about that protein can cause diabetes. Do you ever hear that?
No, I
have a chapter in my book that describes the mechanism of how diabetes gets created from eating protein foods. Your pancreas, in order to process a piece of steak, has to shed out more insulin than you require for 1/2 pound of sugar.
And we only have about 8.5 minutes before we have to, shut this down for the break. But if any of our listeners have any questions, 847-244-1220. We are talking with Andreas Moritz of the Ener-Chi Wellness Center. I hope I'm pronouncing your name correctly. Is it Andreas or?
Yes, Andreas.
Okay, because I know some people from different regions of the world pronounce it a little bit different.
Right.
I want to make sure. But the number 847-244-1220. Now, the process of cleansing we're talking about here of the body and everything. One thing that I had heard from people that have taken it, because I have a lot of friends in different places, because you had mentioned the immune deficiency and everything, AIDS and HIV. That they came out with this magical cocktail that for $1,500 a dose on average, you can take this and supposedly it will prolong the life. And a lot of people tell me that they have to constantly use the bathroom, constantly after drinking this cocktail. Could that be something that they've added to this? Is a flush that's taken it out, or are we?
Oh yes, you see, every AIDS patient I ever came across had a massive amount of stone formation in the bile ducts of the liver, and in many cases they were caused by taking recreational drugs or medical drugs, antibiotics. A lot of homosexual people, especially in the 80s, were taking recreational drugs, and they had to be treated for infections, and so they were on antibiotics for years on end. And so I found a lot of evidence to the effect that these people just required liver cleansing and changed their lifestyle a bit, like sleeping early at night, and I found the symptoms of what they call AIDS disappear. HIV viruses, again, it's a myth that HIV virus is causing AIDS. This has been disproved long time ago by the actual inventor of the HIV virus, who was a French guy in Paris. And so when he actually said it's impossible for HIV to cause AIDS, and AIDS is not something that is like you can put on, you say, well, it's one disease. No, it can be any kind of disease, like pneumonia plus HIV, you call it AIDS. You can take arthritis and put HIV in there. That's an AIDS disease too. Almost every kind of disease, major disease, has been categorized as an AIDS disease because they found HIV particles. And what I discovered, there are many HIV particles in the body. There can be 20, 30 different kinds of HIV particles, and they are basically DNA particles or RNA particles. They are fragments of the RNA molecule, and when they appear in the blood, the body will produce antibodies. You can measure them. There are people that have survived AIDS naturally. They never think about it anymore. Once they have taken care of the root causes of what caused it in the first place. HIV is not one of those things that caused it in the first place.
It's kind of like one of those things, like nobody ever dies in prison because they take you to death at a hospital.
Yeah.
Nobody really dies of pneumonia or something else that was a result of AIDS, but
exactly.
Isn't the actual cause of death.
No, that's actually, it's called a passenger virus, a harmless like the cold virus. The body doesn't viruses. Viruses come in when there is a fertile ground, when there is a milieu, when there is something infected. In fact, these viruses, what they do is they attack nucleus of cells in order to prevent them from mutating into cancer cells. We have given such a bad name to germs and blame them for diseases that are not really diseases. They are just survival mechanisms. And it's unfortunate that we have fallen into that trap of believing that there is a huge enemy out there that tries to kill us, creating that monster.
Well, the drug companies are so broke they got to make money somehow.
Yes.
Right. And the way to contact you, if anybody wants more information, is the Ener-Chi, and we're going to spell that Enerchi Well Center.
So Ener-Chi.com.
Oh, right, that's the website. But Ener-Chi, and you are in Greer, South Carolina.
Yes.
And like you had said, Ener-Chi, Ener-Chi.com is your website, and you can get all of this information, including if you've never seen gallstones. You've got some huge pictures there that are pretty nasty of some gallstones.